Let's have a look at this conversation, one of the conversations from this weekend. I'm really disappointed in the messaging from Labor. I think they're getting it really wrong. And I'm going to show you why and what they should be saying. So Ayesha Verrall was on Q&A in the weekend and getting asked about, because, you know, the National Party has been very, very clever in marketing this idea that there are too many public servants. And not one person in the media has ever pushed back going, well, how many should there be? And why is there too many?
Yep.
No one's asked that question. They've just taken on, and, you know, we dig on Jack Tame's interviewing, but he hasn't done it. No one's asked the question of, you know, Luxon and of Seymour, why is it too many? But what we've heard is it's too many. So I'm going to play this for you, this first bit, and then I've actually scripted something here a little bit. I just wrote this before we came on here as to what Labor's narrative and messaging should be around this. So let's get into this. This is going to be 2 or 3 minutes of basically fumbling for an answer, getting caught up in the numbers, trying to go, well, it's per capita, it's against the labour force, it's actually the population, and it loses, the messaging gets lost completely. And I'll explain to you what it should be shortly. I'll give you an example of Ayesha Verrall in the weekend. I'm not critical of her so much, but this is a criticism of Labor in general. Their messaging is poor at the moment around this conversation.
How much has the public service increased since 2017?
The public service has grown
Oh my God, I'm having
however, I think the key thing there is that this government is making choices to shrink the size of the public service in order to pay for its tax cuts.
Perfect messaging. Shrink the size of the public service to pay for tax cuts. Perfect messaging. That's it. That's the perfect messaging. Stage one.
Argue that there are services that New Zealanders need and depend on that are being taken away in order to fund those tax cuts, and that's a political decision.
Okay, we'll come to that in a moment. So roughly in line with the population increases. So when you say roughly in line, give me more specificity there. What do you mean?
The proportion of the employed people in New Zealand who are employed in the public service has stayed approximately the same during the time Labor was in government.
So the proportion of employed people, that means the labour force.
So they're getting caught up in the numbers here, yeah?
Yes, it does. I suppose there has, but I don't believe the age structure of the population changed substantially during that time.
Well, just these numbers are absolutely critical because in assessing the growth, right? So if we look at the
No, so this is wrong. They're not essential. Because what they're doing is they're falling into Nationals, and I'll say trap, or you might say, you know, clever messaging, is that they're only essential if you believe that there are too many public servants. Yet we haven't yet had the question asked, why are there too many? You know, quantify that for us. How do you know there's too many? And the answer is not because we can't afford it.
Baseline FTEs, since 2017, when Labor took office, there's been a 39% increase. Adjusted for population growth, though, the public service still increased by 25% over that time.
Jack, I don't believe that is the figures that I have seen. But in any case, I can also tell you in another way that we have a lower public service for the size of our population compared to other
per
countries.
capita. So listen, I'm actually not going to go any further. You get the idea, Chewy? The idea is very much about this population, the size of our population. We've got per capita public, and Jack's framing was all about the growth. I'll give you an example of bear with me, okay? We've got a tank of water. At the top of the tank of water, there is an outlet, okay? The tank needs to be full to the top for the outlet to get access to the water. When National comes in, they take it from being a full tank to a half full tank, yeah? The tank needs to be full because it needs to reach the outlet at the top. So Labor doubles the number, or doubles the amount of water, doubles the number of whatever, and they put it back up to a level where now it's reaching the outlet so the tank's working again. They're not asking, is the tank working? They're just going, well, National's tank was only half as full as yours is. So that's what they're missing. So this is the answer to the question. I just jotted this down before we came on, so it might be a bit of a formed question. Labor, when they get asked questions about the numbers, they need to say something like this. National decimated the public sector under John Key. We need to get it back to a workable level. Then we increased some areas more due to COVID, which we were then beginning to decrease as COVID grew less desperate. The debate is not just about increasing in size. It's about taking the number to a workable workforce versus not, which is exactly what National is currently doing under the auspice of Labor bad. That's what they should be saying. They should be saying the tank needs to be filled to the top where it's going to work. And just because we've doubled the amount of water in there doesn't mean we're bad. It actually means they have actually dropped the level of water so low that it's not functioning, and that's what we're going to see happen.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely perfect messaging, because you look when you're pushing back against someone else's messaging, and let's say the messaging on the right is Labor's blown out the public service. There's just too many workers. Again, they're avoiding the point of what is too many workers.
Yeah.
What is the number? Why is it too many?
Yeah.
You don't hear that. You just hear the thing. There are too many public sector workers, because that has been consistent messaging from the right since the fucking 80s.
Yep.
You know, it's gliding on. It's always gliding on. But then Labor come in and start pushing back directly against that. They start arguing the amount of public servants and that sort of thing. Exactly what you're saying, Pat.
Yeah.
They're not giving us context. They're not giving us hard enough. They're just trying to answer what National have put out there and ACT have put out there.
Yep.
So stop responding to their messaging. Get your message squared away.
Yep. And journalists and people with access. I've emailed Ayesha Verrall's office a couple of times. We don't hear back. You know, we're not worth their time. Journalists who have access, stop just fucking going, well, there's been a 25% increase and only a 10% increase in population, because what you have to ask is, why was there a 25% increase? Was it too many? Was under National there too few? Give us some, like if I was in the department up on the 9th floor working with a Labor MP or minister, I'd be saying, what we need to do is find the research and see how the public sector was working under John Key, to then help explain why we increased the numbers, not just that we increased it, but why. So Labor bad. Labor's not doing the work for this. You guys have lost your messaging, and you're getting caught up in conversations like you're having with Jack there, which is just about numbers and trying to say per capita or versus the labor force or overall. You know, it's lost. The numbers don't matter. What matters is, like we said last week, bigger government is not better. Smaller government is not better. Better government is better. I want to know the number of public servants that gives us a better government. Is Labor too many? Is National too few? Give us the number and let's make it work better. But just talking about the numbers never addresses that question of, is it better? And that's the problem, Chewie. Right, let's move on. Sorry, yep.
No, go.
There was some very good messaging as well in this conversation, and this is something that needed to be shouted from the rooftops before the election and wasn't.
But yeah, I think, Jack, where you're going is this difference between whether public servants services are delivering for New Zealanders. And I think there were multiple achievements under the Labor government. Our carbon emissions came down for the first time. We built more state houses than any government since the 1970s. We had a world-leading COVID-19 response. We lifted 66,000 children out of poverty. So there are areas that were a focus for the government where there were very good outcomes.
Great messaging. Great messaging. Yep. Should have been on every billboard before the election. Drop the ball again, Labor.
And we mobilise the public service and others around that.
So I'm interested in public sentiment around this. Mm-hmm. Do you think that New Zealanders feel that public services improved by 25% during the time you were in office?
Yeah, probably not. And that was probably reflected in the election result. So I think that is a really important area for us to be focused on. I think part of that is the really tough public sentiment we faced after COVID, but also about how we as leaders communicate about how we're changing public services and how we set ourselves realistic goals to step through. So what I'm talking about is whether or not we set a small number of still very ambitious priorities for ourselves as a government, or work on a wider set, but perhaps not be able to deliver on all of them.
So there you go. That was good. That was good messaging. And those things about the achievements of Labor, as I said, as we've said before, should be on every single billboard, you know, because the other part of the conversation after that then got into talking about how many managers there were under Labor versus how many managers there are. It's all this numbers thing that they're losing it from. But the messaging that Ayesha gave there was great. Was really good, really strong. I've got one more to play to. Do you want to jump in first?
No, roll it.
Okay, so the last part of the conversation we're going to play here is questions about what will the new government's cuts lead to? Where are we going with all the cuts that are coming?
What are the biggest changes that New Zealanders will notice with the new government's cuts?
Well, I think the changes to disability services, to benefits, and to the support for frontline education workers provided by workers at the Ministry of Education, those will all have impacts. Another thing I would note, Jack, is public servants, a lot of the work they do is respond to emergencies, whether that's biosecurity incursions, outbreaks and others. And I think there's been substantial cuts in those parts of the country where, those parts of the public service where that work is done as well.
So are we only likely to appreciate the scale of these cuts if we face ourselves with an unexpected crisis?
Well, I would say that some of those crises are actually quite likely and would occur across the term of government. But the others are cuts to services, you know, $100 million stripped out of school lunches. There's a hiring freeze on in public hospitals.
I mean, they've actually expanded access to school lunches, though.
In some parts, but they've also cut for the intermediate and high school children. They've cut the value of a lunch.
They've cut the value of a lunch, but they're still going to be receiving lunches, right?
They are, but
we can quibble over the nutrition, we can quibble over the ingredients, but those children.
Yeah, but the point, and I think she's about to say this, Labor's plan was healthy school lunches, so you kind of need to include the quibble over nutrition as a part of the conversation.
Is there any child that was receiving a school lunch that will now no longer receive a school lunch as a result of these changes?
I think one of the outcomes that the program was meant to support was healthy lunches for school children, and the employment outcomes for the parents that are often cooking the lunches for schools.
Yeah, but is the purpose of that program to give kids lunch and food and nutrition, or is it to employ people?
Well, it was all of those things, and you see some of the reports that were done, did go into those other outcomes, including the employment outcomes and the health outcomes for children.
Now, just before we move on, because we weren't going to get into this too strongly, Spinoff did an article, good article today on can you
stole my thunder, Pat.
Oh, sorry, bro.
Queued up.
Can you provide meals for teens for $3 a pop? Apparently, the government's been citing, is it Kids Can? Kids Can?
Yeah.
But Kids Can are saying they do it for $2 a meal. But the Kids Can CEO, Julie Chapman, explained that the charity has calculated that the meals it provides to early education centres, which caters to under fives, are $2 each. It provides meals for about 5,800 kids a day, and there is a long wait list. However, this food is provided more as meal kits in ingredient form. Early childhood centre staff have to actually prepare the meals, so the $2 figure doesn't take into account labour for making the food. So,
what's that, Pat? Off in the distance, I can hear my best friend, who is an early childhood teacher, screaming because someone has figured out that he doesn't have enough to do in his day. Famously, early childhood teachers have heaps of spare time, and now they're going to be putting together meals. And this is the thing. I put this on Facebook when I saw that spin-off story, right? Is that it takes on average less than a week for someone to get hold of Seymour's statement, pick up the phone and talk to a couple of people, and punch holes in it so big you could drive a bus through.
Yeah.
Like, he is trying to hide behind that. Well, I've expanded it to more people. But he's also made it completely unworkable, and the figures that he's using don't stack up. And one of the things that really sticks in my craw, being an MP, he is publicly funded.
Yeah.
I want to know how much David Seymour spends on lunch, considering it's the taxpayer that's paying for it. And if it's anything more than $3, I'm going to be furious.